Hello, and welcome to the Night Sky Reader. I'm here with a story to help you relax, meditate, or gently drift to sleep. Tonight, the first dark ribbon. Settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. At first, the river seems almost entirely given over to white. You stand at the edge of it in a late winter light that is pale but not weak, and the broad surface looks fixed from bank to bank, held under cloudy plates and shelves of shore ice the color of skim milk. Snow remains in the shaded hollows where the bank turns inward. The stones underfoot are dull gray and brown, their surfaces dry where the sun has not touched them, and darker where a little melt has reached them. Old reeds stand in narrow groups at the margin, some upright, some bent and flattened where ice pressed them down through the long cold months. Nothing announces itself, nothing performs. Then, along the near edge, so close to shore that you almost miss it, there is a line of black. Only a seam, pencil thin in one place and slightly wider in the next, a dark ribbon of open water slipping between the bank and the pale ice. Once you see it, the whole river changes shape around it. The white cover is no longer a single still field. It becomes a surface with edges, with underlayers, with somewhere for water to be moving where your eye did not expect movement. This first sign of an early spring river thaw is not broad or dramatic, it is exact. It asks less for excitement than for attention. So you let your gaze rest there, where the black line passes beside the white. The seam is not straight. It wavers around small protrusions of ice and the rounded shoulders of stones at the margin. In one place it narrows until it is hardly more than a gloss of darkness under a thin shelf. In another it opens enough to catch a dim reflection of the sky, blue-gray and faintly silver. The ice above it is not clear. It is cloudy, layered, marked by old trapped air and tiny stress lines softened now by thaw. Along its edge the winter hardness is giving way. The border is no longer crisp. It has the look of something worn from below, gently and continuously, until its outline turns uneven and a little tender. Tiny things travel through the seam. A fleck of bark, a pale skin from a willow catkin, light as paper, a grain of sand lifted and set down again. A loosening fragment of last year's leaf, dark and waterlogged, moving without hurry. The current is small here, but steady enough to carry these minute proofs. You do not need to imagine what the river is doing. It is visible in what it bears. Winter still lies over most of the water, yet under that restraint the current continues, and at the shore it has made itself legible. If you had come looking for a wide, bright opening, you might have thought there was little to see, but this narrow thread is enough to follow. It gives your attention somewhere to go, quieter than scanning the whole landscape for proof. So you follow the dark ribbon as it passes the reeds. Their bases are the first parts freed. Above, the stems remain pale and dry, straw-colored and fibrous, with winter's flattening still visible in their bends. Below, where the seam touches them, the water has worked a narrow path around each stem, exposing the lower inches and leaving a small wet shine at the roots. Some of the reed leaves lie slicked together in brown ribbons. Others begin to separate, each blade distinct again as the ice loses its grip. When a little breeze passes over the bank, the driest stems give a faint click against one another, then settle. Beside them, a line of small stones has been uncovered. They are no larger than plums or walnuts, and where the water has reached them, they are darker than the stones still held in frost farther up the bank. Their surfaces look almost varnished, though what you are seeing is only wetness. Between them, fine grit has collected in pockets, and in those pockets the seam curves and tightens, finding the lowest route. The bank itself shows through in places now. Damp earth, almost black compared with the surrounding snow, appears under a melting edge. The snow above it has turned granular. It no longer has the sealed look of deep winter. Its underside is undercut in a little ledge, translucent near the lip. A few exposed roots hold the bank together where a young alder leans slightly toward the river. They are thin, reddish-brown and half-polished by contact with ice. Nearby, willow stems rise straight out of the margin, dark and smooth, with buds still closed and silvery. Beside the moving seam, trapped bubbles remain in the milky shore ice, held in strings and clusters like tiny glass beads. They seem still at first, then less still when you notice the water passing just below them, making their stillness temporary by contrast. This is the quiet complexity of melting river ice. Not a single release, but 100 softened edges, matte shelf ice above, slick pebbles below, reed stems with their fibrous split ends, granular snow thinning at its base. A root revealed where yesterday there was only white. The river offers all of it along a margin only a few inches wide, and the more closely you look, the less small it feels. You can remain here a long time without needing anything to speed up. One exposed stone leads to another, one stem, one bubble, one dark inch of current under a ledge of ice. Your attention grows more occupied and less restless. The narrow seam does not widen much, but it keeps introducing the bank to you piece by piece, as if the place had been folded shut and is now opening along a single careful crease. After a while, your ear begins to take over from your eye. The sounds are quiet enough that at first they seem part of the general silence, but once heard they separate gently from it. From an overhang of shore ice comes a measured dripping, not constant, but regular enough to mark time without counting it. Each drop falls into a hidden channel with a soft porcelain tap. Under a low shelf, water slips through a narrower place and makes a muted thread of sound, a moving hush no louder than cloth drawn slowly over a table. Farther out, where the river is still broadly covered, the larger current stays muffled. The ice there holds its own quiet. Near shore, the opening makes a small audible line through the stillness. The reeds answer the air in the slightest way. Dry stems touch and separate. A flattened leaf, loosened from the bank, shifts against another with a sound almost too light to name. Somewhere upstream, water finds a little drop in the shoreline, and the note changes for a moment from hush to tick, then back again. Nothing repeats exactly, but nothing startles either. A bird calls from deeper in the river corridor. One short, clear note, then another after a pause. It fits inside the mood rather than altering it. The call is simply part of the air now, like the drip from the ice shelf and the soft murmur under white cover. When the breeze shifts, the sound field shifts with it. The seam seems louder for a moment, then the bank absorbs it again, and the whole scene returns to a low, even register. The faintness itself becomes the experience. A little water entering a narrow channel is enough. A small drop landing on dark current is enough. The nearly inaudible does not need to prove itself. It only needs the room to be heard. So you stand without moving much, and the place comes forward through sound as it first came forward through sight. The seam remains beside the shore, dark and narrow, but now it also has a voice, if a voice can be this modest. Not speech, not message, only the soft physical fact of water passing a place where yesterday it was sealed. The air around you is still cold, yet it no longer has the closed, metallic finish of deep winter. On your face, the difference is slight. In the shade, the cold holds its shape. In the patches of sun, especially where light reaches the dark water rather than the snow, there is a gentler feel. The water gathers and returns warmth differently. It reflects light in a thin, wavering line, and that line seems to soften the bank around it. The snow throws brightness back with a dry reserve. Between the two, your skin can tell where winter remains firm and where it has begun to loosen by degrees. A smell arrives, faint and clean. Not the sweetness of warm spring, not yet. More mineral than floral. Wet soil where the bank has thawed. Cold water over stone. The exposed earth beneath the alder root gives off a dark, grounded scent that vanishes if you try too hard to catch it. The stones nearest the seam are beaded with moisture, and those farther back remain pale and matte under a skin of cold dust. Last year's grass lies flattened in swaths, yellowed and pressed into the contour of the ground. At the very edges of melt, some blades begin to lift. Not much, just enough to cast a finer shadow than before. This is how an early spring river thaw meets you on a quiet bank. not as warmth alone, and not as a sudden opening, but as texture changing under the same old forms. Snow turns translucent at the edge, ice loses its hard outline, and becomes a softened lip over water. Soil darkens, stone deepens in color, air carries a little dampness where for months it carried mostly cold. You do not need to walk far to feel it. The stillness of your own body becomes part of the noticing. The soles of your feet register firm, frozen ground beneath a thin layer of thaw at the surface. Your hands, if tucked into your coat pockets, know the difference between standing in shade and turning slightly toward the sun. Even your breathing seems to fit the place better now, slower and less searching, as if the river's own pace has entered it. At the margin, the seam keeps moving. The olive, a small silt grain, slides through a shallow bend in the current. A willow catkin's skin catches for a second at the edge of ice, then lets go. Water laps once at a narrow shelf, darkens it, recedes. The bank does not change quickly enough to observe in the ordinary sense, yet the whole edge feels active with minute exchanges, each one too small for drama, all of them together enough to alter the quality of the afternoon. And because you have stayed with this single narrow opening, the rest of the river begins to read differently too. What first looked like one broad sheet of white now separates into kinds of white, kinds of stillness, kinds of hidden motion. Along the shore, the shelf ice is softened and undercut. A little farther out, the larger plates are thicker and more opaque, their surfaces marked by faint seams and old snow crust. Between them are hairline bands of darker tone, where the current presses close beneath. In a few narrow places, reflected light appears under the ice itself, a dim moving brightness that tells you water is passing there as well. The river remains mostly winter, but it no longer looks fixed. It looks layered. The same is true of the bank. Patches of snow that seemed uniform from a distance show different ages now. One patch is compact and blue-shadowed where it rests under spruce shade. Another has a softened top and a slumped lower edge where it faces the sun. The reeds are not simply dead stalks. They are anchors for little eddies and markers of where the first water has found room. Stones are not merely scattered along the shore. They hold wetness or frost depending on where the thaw has reached. Root, soil, ice, and current belong to the same ongoing adjustment. On this cold climate riverbank, the changes are modest enough to be overlooked if you expect them to arrive as announcement. But once the dark ribbon has taught your eye what to look for, every part of the place joins in. The seam has widened only a little, if at all. Still, the wider landscape is no longer blank. White to gray, dry to wet, sealed to porous, silent to softly sounding. The river corridor stretches away beyond what you can see from this one standing place, and yet this one standing place feels sufficient. The altar at your side, the stones near your boots, the reeds, the undercut snow, the black water threading beside the shelf ice, all of it forms a complete field of attention. You are not waiting for the river to become a different river. You are simply with it while it remains itself and changes by fractions. Under the white cover, in channels not visible from here, the current goes on. At the edge, the work shows. So when the light shifts a little lower and the pale surfaces take on a quieter sheen, you return to the first image and find it altered only by familiarity. The dark ribbon is still beside the shore ice, still narrow, still moving at its own careful pace. Perhaps it is a touch wider where it rounds the nearest stone. Perhaps the change is only that you can read it more clearly now. Tiny matter continues to pass through it. Flecks of bark, pale catkin skins, a bead of sand, a fragment of leaf turning slowly as it goes. The larger river remains restrained, not yet opened into broad water, not yet finished with winter. White still lies over most of its width. The bank is still cold. The reeds still stand in dry clusters and bent mats. Nothing has become anything else all at once. And yet the place is no longer closed to you. The seam has given you a measure that suits the afternoon, small enough to keep the mind from racing ahead, continuous enough to follow without effort. Because of it, the near shore has become rich with particulars. You know the cloudy shelf ice by its softened edge. You know the trapped bubbles held in milky layers. You know the darker stones where water has touched them, the lifted blades of last year's grass, the faint mineral scent from thawed soil, the drip under the ledge, the thin hush where water slips beneath white cover. None of these details asks for conclusion. Each one simply remains itself, quietly available. There is a comfort in that incompleteness. A narrow seam can carry a season's direction without displaying its end. You can stand beside a landscape still mostly winter and feel no pressure to advance it. By the time you are ready to leave, or ready simply to drift deeper into stillness, the scene is almost the same as when you arrived. White ice, patches of snow, reeds, stones, a quiet bank in late winter light. Only now the black line at the edge is impossible to miss. It continues beside the shore, narrow and certain, slipping under cloudy shelves and past damp earth and exposed roots, carrying its minute cargo onward. You do not need it to widen before you rest. It is enough to know that it is there and moving, and that the river will go on with this patient work after you stop watching. The dark ribbon remains beside the white, a small clear fact in a broad field of stillness, and the whole river, though mostly winter still, is unmistakably in motion. Thank you for spending this time with the Night Sky Reader. May your night be peaceful. Until next time, rest well.